You're listening to Big World Network.
A House Divided, Episode 1, written and read by Jonathan Thompson. Isaiah. I could still smell the paint. The oils thickened the air and greased my face. I looked at the crimson splashes that stained the pillars and stones of the courtyard and couldn't help but smile, thinking about how seriously the Tartarans took all this. I pictured them using stones to pound the seeds and bark and insects together like primates, somehow convincing themselves that it was their sacred duty. They genuinely thought that this all meant something. The paint crawled up the pillars and over the arches like a vine and perverted the entire intention of this place, so I guess they had at least succeeded in that. The courtyard was comprised of a series of columns and arches with no roof or walls and was meant to combine the beauties of nature with those of proper architecture. They had scarred it. Slogans had been furiously scrawled across the stone. I understood their intention, although I really can't say that I understood the sentiment. It was so stupid to me then. I should suffer the misery of devils were I to make a whore of my soul, wrapped up the pillar on the left. Show me a sane man, and I will cure him for you, answered from my right. Madness is tonic and invigorating, sang down from the arch above me. The ground below me shouted, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. The large stones at the base of the staircase that snaked up the hill to the chamber of the eugenics board dripped with, art is not a pastime, but a priesthood. And then I saw it, and my amusement faded quickly. It had been there the entire time, so small and so intricately interwoven with the letters that I had almost missed it. It was a simple design when I had first drawn it as a child, but they had, as they do, made it much more complicated. It resembled a vine, but the leaves and buds contained rough outlines of outstretched human figures. That simple, stupid doodle had almost cost me my life. Now I was furious. No one knew about the doodle except the board, and they would never let that information out. Not about me, not about a chief depurator. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or just dumb luck, but I heard something I would have missed any other day. Everything in me peeked at the smallest crack in the bushes toward the edge of the courtyard. Daniel, my partner, didn't hear it. All he knew was I had taken off running into the haze of dawn, toward nothing. I ran hard. The kid had been hiding, probably to see our reaction, in the hedges by the stairs. That gave him a good vantage point, but left him with a very tight escape route. I went straight for him, trying to scare him. I wanted to make him forget the truth that all Tartarans ingrain in their minds. The depurators have no real power. We had our zap sticks, and I could give him a shock, but the worst I could do to him was send him home. Tartarus was the only true penal provision we had, and our prison was his home. I wanted to make him forget his immunity, but no matter how hard I chased the kid, he seemed to think the whole thing was a game. We both knew I couldn't catch him. He was young, small, spry, and used to manual labor. I was, well, a citizen of Genesis. We lived a charmed life because the Tartarans didn't. I was much bigger than him, though, and I wanted him to know it. I wanted him to think he was being chased by a bull. I knocked over potted plants and pedestals that he vaulted and dodged. I crushed shrubs and snapped branches. Daniel had yelled my name when I first took off, but he was silent now. This probably made the boy a little more uneasy. It wouldn't have if he had known him. Daniel was always more of an observer. Whatever did it, for whatever reason, the boy became more panicked, his steps just a little less sure. I saw his foot slip once and knew I had him. I gained just enough steam. He hopped over a railing and landed wrong. His right ankle rolled out from under him, and he went down with a short cry, like a shocked dog. I leapt off the same railing and used the momentum to hit him harder than I needed to. I stood up and grabbed his collar, dragging him flailing in the dirt behind me. He fought me the whole way back to the center of the courtyard, and for every time he had slapped or kicked me on the walk, I went out of my way to drag him over stone after jutting stone. Daniel was leaning against one of the pillars, trying to look uninterested, but I hardly noticed him. I slammed the boy face first into one of the pillars, my knee in his back, and his sweat mixing with the paint. "Did you do this?" I growled. As he turned to look at me, paint from the vine design smeared onto his fair, freckled skin. I do not regret the things I have done, but I leaned in closer, pressing the air out of him. I would get an answer. Someone put that there to taunt me, and I needed to know who. "Did you do this?" He shifted his head more toward me, and the stone scraped his face raw. "But those I did not do." I put my face closer to his ear. He needed to feel how badly I wanted to hurt him. "What's your name?" A weak smile. "Call me Ishmael." He was playing with me, and I was in no mood to play. I hauled him to his feet by his collar, but he was lighter than I realized, and his toes barely touched the ground. Daniel stood upright, alarmed by my aggression. "Isaiah, relax!" "Shut up," I snapped back. "What is your name, boy?" "My father's family name was Perip, and..." I punched him square across the jaw. "Isaiah, just put him down! Scan his tag!" Daniel was starting to jog over toward us, but neither of us really paid attention to him. The stubborn kid kept talking, and his face was so confident, like his words had deep significance. They didn't. "My Christian name, Philip, I punched him again. My infant tongue could make of both names. This time I drive my fist into his gut and let him fall to his knees. His voice finally began to shake. Nothing longer or more explicit than Pip, so I called myself Pip. I let loose another blow to his face. His head dropped, but after a moment of effort, he lifted his eyes back up to meet mine, and came to be called Pip. My anger was quickly mixing with boredom. I would later learn that he was reciting classical quotations which bore incredible significance in Tartarus. To me, and to Daniel, they were gibberish. Our literary education, and that of all Genetians, was limited to 3 books, all written by the Eugenics Board. There was the dictionary, which defined our language, the history, which detailed the events that led up to the formation of our twin cities, and the perversion of our senses, which discussed how creativity, in all forms, was a symptom of mental illness and had caused the decline and fall of the world before us. Daniel passed his zapstick to me. Of course, I had mine, but this was a gesture intended to get my attention. These were the closest things to weapons we were given. They could be used to scan the ID tags of citizens, used as batons, and at the very end contained a pressure-activated stun tip. Just scan him. He's too insane. The boy looked at Daniel now. Though this be madness, yet there's method in't. I had had enough. I hauled the skinny body up into the air and slammed him against a pillar. My jaw was locked so tight that my voice just barely leaked out. Who showed you this? And then that scrawny, clumsy boy became someone else entirely. In a fluid, practiced motion, he broke loose from my grip and somehow appeared behind me. His arms were spread wide, and I could see the early morning light glinting off a thin shard of metal in each of his hands. The claws started their wide arc toward me. I caught his right arm with both hands and stepped under it, out of the way of the incoming left. The momentum of my step twisted his grimy arm behind his back. I had practiced this maneuver thousands of times, but was never able to complete it. I twisted my hands the way I had been taught and felt a sharp crack in his bony wrist. The boy cried out and released his grip on both makeshift knives. One blade slid into my hand like it wanted to be there. The other made a dull clang on the stone. After that, everything went hazy. Somehow, the blade in my hand found itself pressed against the Tartaran's throat. Daniel was yelling something, but to this day, I'm not sure what. I remember leaning down and whispering in the filthy ear, "Will anyone remember you? Do you really think this means anything? Do you mean anything? Do you really think that Tartarus will miss one more psychotic?" And I will always remember what he said in response. "In a mad world, only the mad are sane." And then he was dead. Daniel came into focus, loud and clear. "You idiot! Do you realize what you've done?" "Of course I do. I treated this man outwardly the way he's been thought of inwardly his whole life, like livestock. Don't act like you care about them, Daniel. I've heard the way you talk about these people. We allow them to work our land, Daniel? What a privilege to serve the interests of the board that calls them sick, calls them insane, condemns them. Is it a chance at redemption, then? Do they pay their debts to society, to you, by working while you do nothing?" I turned to walk away, leaving Daniel trembling with what I can only guess was a volatile mixture of fear and rage. "You really don't understand, do you?" he called after me. "This is much bigger than any of that." But I knew exactly what I had done. I had become the first murderer in history.
This has been a presentation of Big World Network. Visit us on bigworldnetwork.com for more free weekly series, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to Big World Network.